All right. Sorry about the delay, everyone. I am trying to work through the technology challenges. And today we're going to talk about career change and answer any questions you might have about changing careers, pivoting your career, changing jobs. You can ask me about resumes. You can ask me about interview skills. You can ask me about Gallup strengths, which I'm very passionate about. I have some stories that I can also share. And yeah, I just want to talk to people that are thinking about changing careers. And it's a very scary thing when you rely on your income to support the family. But yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. So I'm happy to share some advice and take your questions this evening. Thank you for joining us. The first thing that I was going to talk about is that we hear in the media something called the Great Reshuffle. It actually was called the Great Resignation, but now in Australia it's more about the Great Reshuffle. And although the US is seeing like 4 million people a month quit their jobs, it's not as big in Australia, and it's also lagging because of the COVID impacts. But I am seeing a lot more job advertisements and skills shortage in Australia. So it's a good time to be looking at new roles. And I think employers are more open-minded with their candidates, which is great. Okay, so we've got a question. What are the most important things, in your opinion, when considering changing careers? Well, obviously, it's income is important. I know that that's nice to say we want to do what we love, but that's not always a luxury that everyone has, or it might not be what they love, might not be a big moneymaker. However, you need to know your strengths, your top 10 strengths specifically, because if you can't feed all of those top 10 strengths in a career you love, you need to know what they are so that you can supplement it by feeding that strength in another outlet. So for example, if you have a strength called ideation, it's usually people that are very creative, and perhaps they enjoy taking a pottery class or going to a club of other creative minds. So your job may not feed those strengths, but you need to make sure that you're paying attention to them and that you're aware of your top strengths. And if you're not sure how to do that, I don't get any kickbacks from Gallup strengths, but you can go on my webpage on resources, and then there's a page all about strengths, and you can learn how to take the strength survey. There's a cheap version where you just get your top 5 strengths, and there's a big version which is $40 versus $80, and I say definitely it's worth the $80 so that you can unlock all of your strengths and then start to compare which of those strengths can be used in that career. The other thing that are important things to consider in changing careers are people that you might know that could give you advice on what it's like to work in that career, and what do they like, what do they not like, or even people in the industry you may not know, but someone in your network does know. So networking is basically achieving 65% of the jobs nowadays is through who we know versus advertisements. So it's really important to leverage your own network and other people's network to think about gathering information about new careers that you might be interested in. Here's another question. Should I be more focused on chasing a career based on passion or money? So, well, it depends on your strengths, to be honest. So sometimes people have a strength called competition, and that may correlate to they want the money. And so I can understand. Or there's another strength called significance, where people want to be seen doing visible, prominent, prestigious type of roles, or even working for prestigious companies. So sometimes that quest for money is built into your strengths. I would say definitely you shouldn't be picking a job that your parents think you should choose. It should definitely match the majority of your strengths. And if it doesn't, then you're just going to make yourself miserable. So your passion is the most important. And then you can, there's no one formula for your strengths. That set of strengths could map to 3 different careers that you might love. And so that's the beauty of trying things and investigating and interviewing people to get information on what they like, what they don't like, so that you can make a more informed decision. Okay, so I would love to talk about one of my clients that did a career change, and her background was that she went to school. She chose a degree that her dad urged her to, which was tax law. She got a job for a big bank here in Australia, and she was the kind of the one-man desk support for a team that gave advice to the team on tax law. And she came to me very unhappy. She wasn't sure what is the right career. She kind of thought about coaching, like executive coaching. And when we unpacked her top 10 strengths, she had a lot of relationship builder strengths, which made sense because she was very lonely in her job and she didn't feel like people could come to her to help solve problems. It was more transactional. And she really enjoyed, like when we surveyed her friends, she really enjoyed helping her friends and family solve problems, whether it was just personal or career. So she took a executive coaching course to learn more about that, and she quite enjoyed it. And then a year later, she was asked to take on a general manager role of another division at the employer that she works at, and she's loving it. So the new role that she achieved is much better suited for working with people, developing some of the staff, cultivating a new culture in the team, and just being able to solve more problems, but at an influencing level. So it very much matched her strengths profile. So I was very excited for her. So that's a success story of a career change. Another one is actually a lady that I talked to today. So it's still in process, but she got a degree in health science. She was a workers' comp case worker, and she was very unhappy. And then what happened, there were 2 of the caseworkers. One of the caseworkers went out on mental health leave, which meant her workload doubled, which made her more stressed. So then she took a couple weeks off of mental health leave, and we unpacked her strengths and realized that, one of her strengths is intellection. And so after a year or 2 of doing this job, it's not challenging her anymore. And when she's having this constant kind of fire hosing of cases calling her and asking for updates or asking for help, or she's having to ring them, that is not a good work environment for somebody that has intellection. They need that downtime. They need that quiet time. They're very good work at home employees, and so it's just becoming exhausting for her. So we talked about other roles that are still within that OH&S or injury space, and now we've recognized that the injury management advisor is a good role for her, and it's a bit of a step up, which she wasn't confident to go for that. But then she shared with me that a recruiter called her and asked her would she be interested in that. So it is a logical step for her. We can reposition her resume to show some of those leadership achievements, and that moving to an advisory role, and that way the caseload that she has to check on day in and day out is lighter, and she's more kind of a person that comes in more periodically than having to check on the case files every day, every week. So it's a bit more, I don't want to say relaxed, but it's more um, a balance of doing some alone one-on-one work time versus working with all of the cases that she's assigned to. So it was a good match. So she was quite excited about that career change, but stay tuned because we're going to reshape her resume to appeal to that audience and then work on her interview skills so that she has the stories that positions her well for those roles that she wants to achieve. Here's another question. So you mentioned the Great Reshuffle. I haven't heard about that. Can you share a bit more about it, please? So as I mentioned, in the US, there's 4 million people every month that are quitting their jobs. And this is, I guess, when we look at historical studies, back in 1918, when they had the Spanish flu, there was also a major shift from the employers to the employees. And it looks like history is repeating itself. And part of that shift is employees are reflecting on what's important to them, the balance in focusing on their job versus their family and their home life. And a lot of people have given way more blood, sweat, and tears to the employer because of COVID in order to keep the wheels running. And after all that is said and done, if an employer mishandles that employee and doesn't show appreciation and value, it's made employees very bitter, I guess, or if they had a loved one that they lost due to COVID, or their children got sick and there wasn't empathy in that situation, it made them emotionally detached from their employers. And so that's what's leading to this great reshuffle, because if the employers aren't treating the employee with dignity and respect and valuing their contribution, they know that they can go somewhere else where they get that flexibility and value and possibly greater pay in some cases. So the Great Reshuffle is causing people to reevaluate what they want from their careers and their jobs. And if their needs are not getting met, they are looking around. And so there's a lot of churn. And the other thing that's happening with the Great Reshuffle is we've got a skills shortage in Australia because they haven't yet opened the borders for people, tourists, and for people to come here looking for work. Australia is very finicky in that they won't hire you for a job if you're overseas. They will only hire you if you've got permanent residency or citizenship, and it's very hard to do that until you get here, work a while, build a reputation, build your skills, and then you can possibly find an employer to sponsor you, or you can apply for permanent residency, but that usually takes 1 to 2 years. So the Great Reshuffle, there is opportunity for locals and for people that are already within Australia to find other roles, to negotiate more pay, to negotiate greater flexibility, to take time off in some cases. People are saying it's just not worth it. So it's a good thing. I think the fact that it's shifting power to the employees I love it. It's about time. Okay, and another question is, are there certain industries where employees have gained lots of power due to the pandemic? Hospitality, that's one. So people are getting paid more money to work at cafes and restaurants and bars because they're having a hard time, because those people are more vulnerable to COVID, then they get isolated for a week. So it's very difficult to keep those employees steady at the job. And so, like, for example, our son, Liam, he works at one pub, and they've had to ask him to work at 2 other pubs that are owned by this chain, his employer. And so he's been good about helping out the other locations. When they had the Woolwich Pier Hotel had 10 cases of COVID that had to go into isolation, so they couldn't honor some of the events bookings that they had. Anyway, so yes, hospitality is definitely shifted the power. I would say tourism has definitely lost the power. And I was just working with the client last week that they were lowballing her with the salary and they said, well, we'll give you a bonus. And she and I talked about how that's not very likely to happen, given that the tourism industry is still suffering greatly from people that are worried about catching COVID if they travel to other locations. So yeah, what other industries? Teachers are starting to quit their jobs. So there's a demand for teachers and substitute teachers. So I don't know this yet, but I think they can demand higher pay. And I think healthcare nurses will see that in our state, the government froze salary increases for a while for nurses. So I think that's going to trigger, they're going to have to cough up some pay increases to retain nurses at a certain level, because that they're starting to see a shortage with that because of COVID and because they're burnt out and they're saying, I don't want to do this career anymore. So yeah, so there is a bit of power shift in a few of those industries. Yeah, so education, I think in the universities, they're probably going to suffer. If they're not in a critical job, they may have to start looking for something else, because the universities are losing the income from overseas students. Here's another question. If I don't change career, is it a good time to ask for a raise? And do you have any tips for preparing for that conversation? Yes, you can ask for a raise. You have to be sensitive to what's going on in the company. So if the company is reporting losses, then you probably are not putting yourself in a good light. But if you know you're working a lot more hours, or you've taken on work from another employee, it is an okay time to go to them and say, look, I'm performing more for this company, and I would come prepared with a list of your achievements or the hours and the tasks that you are now responsible for, as opposed to a month or 6 months ago. And then do your research on the salary benchmarking data for your city and your job type. So in my website, on the resources page, I think it's employee negotiations, you can download the Hayes benchmarking salary data for most of the jobs. I'd say 90% of the jobs across Australia. And it gives you the average salary for, let's say, an accountant in Sydney versus Melbourne versus Brisbane. And if you have, 0 to 5 years, then generally you'd be on the bottom to the middle of that salary range. If you have more than 5 years, generally you've got more leverage that you can negotiate a higher salary from the middle to the high end of that range. So have the figures, do the research, have your list of achievements, and then when you go to the conversation with your boss, keep it to the facts, stick to the facts, no emotion, no, I feel frustrated, or just keep, I really enjoy working at this company. I want to stay, as long as I can to further develop my career. But given that my responsibilities have changed or something's changed, I really think that it's the right time for me to ask for more compensation. I've done the research. I can share that research with you, but at this time, I really want to request a salary increase of XYZ. That's based on these achievements that I've done. And I know that I'm working on some other big projects that I will deliver for you later this year. And this just helps my situation and my workload if I can be compensated accordingly. And then regardless of what the boss says to that request, make it short, simple, make sure you're in a private room. Don't do it in public hallway. It's better if you can do a conference room where it's not your boss's office, so there's no power dynamic. Let them go away and think about it, because you don't know what their strengths are. They may need to go have a think about what's fair, and maybe consult the HR team. And then follow up that conversation with an email saying, thank you so much for listening, for having that conversation with me today. Just as discussed, here's what I'm requesting. And you can tell the boss that you're going to send that email as a follow-up, but here's what I'm requesting. So put it in writing, because if they knock you back now, when HR knows to do a compensation review, they're going to hold your request in greater urgency, I guess, for when they do the annual review of salaries. So it helps you get more percentage points as of an increase if they don't do it at that time. But balance it with what's happening at the company. If they are losing money, it's probably not a great time to ask for a raise. It's maybe better for you to look elsewhere if there are challenges that you're seeing the company face. Good questions, guys. Thank you. Okay, let's talk about another career change. So I've had another lady who was a social worker, and she, I think, was studying for her bachelor's degree in social work, and probably about midway through, she realized, I don't really love this, but she had pressure from her husband and her family to continue studying that degree. She got the degree, and now she's done social work for 5 years. And what's happened in the last few months is she's realized that she's been abused by her partner. She's decided that it's better to separate in the marriage, and she's got 2 little girls. So now that she's a social worker, when she goes to visit with the social care clients, it's triggering her trauma from that domestic abuse. So she collects rent payments from social housing, and some people are violent, some people are threatening, some people are angry that they don't like the conditions of the housing, which is out of her control. And so her employer actually told her to suck it up. You need to be able to take the abuse. And so she's worked with me. We figured out what her strengths are. Her strengths very much match HR, the industry, and she was really excited to talk about HR because she had a short stint of that many years ago working at a recruitment firm. So now we've rewritten her resume to appeal to the HR admin type roles, and she's had like 4 different job interviews. She hasn't landed a new job yet, but it's been great to see her get that experience and that traction in pivoting her career. And the reason I think that she's gotten calls is because in her resume, she actually says in a very unemotive way that she realized as a single mom that the social work was causing trauma for her, and so she needed to get out of that industry, and people have been very understanding of that. So owning that leaving story and the reason why, as long as it's not a red flag for the future employer, is very good, that you can explain why you're pivoting or why you're transitioning careers. So I do think she's going to land a new job soon. She's had a lot of response from her applications. She's getting the interview practice to talk about how her skills, the people skills that she developed in working with all the different people in the community, are quite useful in HR. So I am watching this space to see where she lands, but I'm very excited for her future, that she can do something that's more kind of 9 to 5, and then she can be present and happy with her kids when she's not working. Okay, here's another question. Can the employee manipulate the power dynamic in their way? Yes, of course, we all know people that are really good at tooting their own horn. What I would tell you and everyone is to keep like a secret folder. So even keep some companies are very good about doing performance reviews, and they make you write down your achievements against the company metrics or the organizational goals. And that's a record that you should, when you leave the company, you should take a snapshot of those achievements because they are so useful on your resume. But as you work, you should keep a drafts folder in your email or a document or on a handwritten notebook, the achievements that the wins that you've had. And it could be you got a compliment from a customer today, or you figured out how to solve a problem that's been bugging you for 6 months. So all of these little wins, whether they would be communicated to the boss or not, are process improvements. They're things where you took something and made it better. If you have metrics that you grew revenue or grew efficiency or grew customer base, those metrics are really powerful if you can record those in your bullet points. But having that list, I found one year when I went to my performance review discussion with my boss, because I made a habit of that, and I had responsibility for so many weird things. I had HR responsibility, I had procurement responsibility, I had OH&S, work health place safety, and I had recorded achievements from all of those different areas. And when I put them all into one document and said, here boss, here's what I've done this year, he actually said to me, I cannot believe you achieved this much. And then that informed his decision to give me a 5% raise that year. So I was really happy about that. But yeah, so you can shift the power dynamic. If you have a boss that doesn't give you performance reviews, then you need to manage up and figure out how to have those conversations. And it may not be weekly or fortnightly, maybe monthly or every second month. Just say, hey, I wanted to touch base with you, and have a list of things that you'd love to have your boss's input on. Here are things that you're challenged with, but I'm thinking about these as a solution. So never just dump on the boss all the problems you're having. Have solutions and suggestions for them so that they can weigh in, and they will be impressed that you're coming to them with solutions for some of these problems. So that's a way that you can manipulate, I guess not, I wouldn't call it manipulate, but it's keeping the communication lines open with your boss so that they're aware of the things that the fires that you're fighting and the things that you're achieving. Good question. Okay, so I've shared 2 stories. One's in progress, or 2 are in progress. Third's good. I would like to talk about, there's a video that's on my YouTube channel I cannot believe this is blown up, but it's a video titled Why Not Me? And it's all about, for me, I recorded this video for career changers, because so many people just sit back in fear. And this video talks about, well, what if there was nothing that could get in your way? What would you do? And so why not you in getting a new job? So if you get a chance to watch that video, I would love it. And then I'm also looking to do something special for International Women's Day. And International Women's Day is on March 8th. So I'm going to do some articles and real life stories on Break the Bias. So I'd love you guys to stay tuned for those posts that go through all my social media channels. And yeah, maybe next time I'll do a webinar in a month or so about bullying, because I've had a few people that have come to me that are getting bullied, and it just breaks my heart because people don't have to put up with that. And there's a way that you can set your boundaries and what you will accept and what you won't accept. And there are channels that you can go through at the employer to respond to bullying behavior. So yeah, it's not okay. And there are some resources on my web page if you want to look around for that, or send me an email and I'll have a free chat with you. I think that's it for now. Thank you everyone for watching. Sorry about the technology challenges I had in the beginning, and I wish you a good night and happy job hunting or career changing. Go get 'em. Bye.